In the bustling city of Houston, Texas, there lived a couple who, to others, appeared to be the picture of perfect love. Their names were Michael Turner and Alyssa Monroe. Their friends admired them, and even strangers envied their relationship. Michael, a tall and muscular man with a captivating smile, worked in the construction industry. He was raised in a conservative family, where traditional values, especially regarding marriage, were of great importance to him. A devoted man, he always put others' needs before his own. Alyssa, an incredibly beautiful woman with wheat-colored skin and deep eyes, had a warm and passionate soul. As a successful hairstylist, she was making a name for herself in the beauty world. Her natural charm attracted everyone around her, but what set her apart was her kindness and her ability to connect with others. It didn't take long for Michael to be captivated by this woman. Their relationship progressed at an unexpected pace. They first met at a church event, and just a few months later, Michael proudly introduced Alyssa to his family. Everything seemed like a flawless romance. Friends and family were astonished by the speed of their relationship, but Michael was certain that Alyssa was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. His proposal was met with joyful tears from Alyssa, and soon they were celebrating a grand wedding at a historic Houston church. On their wedding day, as Michael stood at the altar, his heart raced with excitement and love. He watched Alyssa enter in a radiant white dress that made her look like a celestial goddess. But in the midst of these dreamlike moments, there were signs of anxiety on Alyssa's face. Sometimes her gaze would drift off into the distance, and as they exchanged rings, her hands trembled. Michael attributed these signs to the stress of the wedding day and didn't think much of it. Their honeymoon in the Caribbean islands was full of romantic moments. But even in that tropical paradise, Michael noticed that Alyssa sometimes withdrew into herself. Her laughter became less frequent, and her eyes were filled with an inexplicable concern. He chalked up these changes to the fatigue of marriage and travel, trying not to worry. When they returned to Houston, they began their life together in a cozy home on the outskirts of the city. Michael eagerly worked on renovating the house, creating a warm and inviting space for himself and his wife. Meanwhile, Alyssa focused on growing her hairstyling business. A bright future full of love was exactly what Michael had hoped for. But soon signs of change in Alyssa's behavior began to appear. She became more mysterious by the day. Her phone was always locked, and she received suspicious calls. Sometimes she would disappear for hours, and when Michael asked about it, she gave vague responses. She claimed she was spending time with her friends, but Michael never knew these friends. Over time, his sense of doubt grew stronger. One day he decided to surprise his wife by showing up unannounced at her beauty salon. But again and again, he found the salon empty. A heavy unease settled in his chest, but he still didn't want to believe that his wife was hiding something from him. Yet the truth was harsher than he could continue to ignore. Michael tried to convince himself that he was just being overly sensitive, that the natural stresses of married life had taken their toll, and that no relationship was perfect. But as time passed, the tension between them grew. Their intimacy had faded, and even when they did come together, Michael felt like something had changed between them. Alyssa often turned away from him, avoiding eye contact, and her behavior suggested she was on the verge of revealing an important truth. Then, one fateful night, everything was exposed. Michael had always respected Alyssa's privacy, but his growing suspicions pushed him to do something he never thought he would. He decided to search through her belongings while she was away. As he rummaged through the drawers, he came across a small box at the bottom of the closet, hidden under a pile of old clothes. With trembling hands, he opened the box and found documents that froze the blood in his veins, including a birth certificate with a name he had never heard before, Elijah Monroe. Confused and terrified, Michael searched further and came across medical records that revealed an unimaginable truth. The documents showed that Alyssa had been born biologically male and had later undergone gender reassignment surgery. The moment his eyes fell on these papers, he felt as though his world had collapsed. The woman he loved, the woman who had promised him loyalty, had kept such a monumental secret from him. Thoughts swirled in his mind like a storm: anger, confusion, heartbreak. Every emotion felt like a dagger to his heart. How could Alyssa have hidden such a fundamental truth from him? He felt as though he had been living with a stranger all this time. Hours passed in silence and disbelief. He sat alone in the house while the ticking of the clock on the wall filled the heavy silence, fueling his anger and sense of betrayal. When Alyssa returned that night, she was met with a sight that would make her blood run cold. Michael was sitting on the edge of the bed, the documents spread out in front of him, like evidence of a crime. As soon as her eyes fell on them, color drained from her face. She stood in the doorway, gripping the handle as if ready to flee. "You lied to me." Michael's voice was calm, but there was a tremor of anger in it. Slowly he rose and took the papers in his hands, as though he had found proof of an unforgivable betrayal. "Who are you?" Alyssa's heart shattered. She had always known this day might come, the day her past would catch up with her, but she never imagined it would happen like this. "Michael, please." Her voice trembled. "I was going to tell you. I swear I was, but I didn't know how. I love you. This doesn't change anything. I'm still the same person I've always been." But her words only fueled Michael's anger further. "Doesn't change anything? You've been lying to me this entire time." His voice rose, full of emotion and disbelief. "You deceived me into marrying you. Do you even understand what you've done? I gave you everything. My love, my loyalty, my life, and all this time, you were hiding the biggest truth from me." Tears streamed down Alyssa's face. "I didn't tell you because I was afraid of losing you. You are everything to me. If you had known, I thought you wouldn't love me anymore." Michael's face twisted with rage. "You were right to think that." His words cut through Alyssa's heart like a knife. Michael's fury was now beyond control. Inside, a storm of emotions surged that he could no longer contain. The room felt heavier, as if the walls were closing in. The woman he loved had now become a stranger in his eyes. The argument escalated. Their voices grew louder, the tension in the air palpable. Alyssa was trapped between trying to explain herself and fearing Michael's reaction. She had never seen him like this, so out of control, so filled with rage. "Michael, please, just calm down. We can talk about this. I'll answer any questions you have. Please, just don't do something you'll regret." But Michael no longer listened. Michael saw nothing but rage. The betrayal burned like an uncontrollable fire within him. In a moment of blind fury, he walked heavily toward the garage. His gaze fell on a hammer. Without a second thought, he grabbed it and with terrifying determination, returned inside the house. Alyssa stood in the bedroom, her body frozen with fear, her heart pounding violently in her chest. Her eyes locked on the hammer in Michael's hands, and her breath caught in her throat. Before she could find a chance to escape, Michael, in a storm of uncontrollable rage, brought the hammer down with savage force. Alyssa screamed, raising her hands to protect herself from the oncoming attack. But Michael relentlessly brought down blow after blow, strike after strike, with unimaginable brutality. Alyssa's pleas for mercy were drowned out by the sound of the hammer crashing into her body. Soon the walls of the home, once a symbol of their love and shared life, were stained with blood. Michael's savagery had gone beyond comprehension. As the horror unfolded, Michael's mind descended into madness. He dragged Alyssa's lifeless body toward the bathroom. Reality slipped through his fingers, and he no longer recognized himself. He went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife from a drawer, and consumed entirely by rage, began to cut and dismember her body. There was no trace of humanity left in him. When the police arrived, what they found was more than just a murder. It was a scene from hell. Alyssa's body was no longer recognizable. Her face had been obliterated by the severity of the wounds. The walls and floors of the room were soaked in blood. Amid this nightmare, Michael sat on the floor, drenched in blood, staring blankly at the devastation he had wrought with his own hands. His gaze was hollow, as if he still could not comprehend the depth of what he had done. Still in shock, he picked up the phone. His hands were shaking. He dialed the number. I killed her." His voice was calm, void of emotion. The operator tried to keep him on the line, asking for details. But Michael's mind was shattered. He could no longer see anything clearly. The only thing he knew was that his life had fallen into a black abyss, a point of no return. When the police entered the house, they found Michael beside Alyssa's body. His clothes were soaked in blood, his face covered in tears. The man who had once been a hard-working and devoted husband was now a hollow shell. a man consumed by his own actions. News of Alyssa's death spread like wildfire through their small community in Houston. The media seized the story, broadcasting the horrific details of the crime, along with the great secret that had led to the tragedy. As the story unfolded, a heated debate sparked across the country. Some saw Michael as a man who had been deceived, while others branded him a monstrous killer. The media made the crime fodder for more social discourse, and the lives of both of them, both in death and life, came under intense scrutiny. The secret that had been hidden out of fear was now revealed in the worst possible way. The detectives who arrived to investigate had seen many things in their careers, but nothing had prepared them for such a nightmare. The home that once symbolized love and hope had now become a symbol of betrayal and death. Michael sat in the interrogation room. His blood-stained clothes had been replaced with a white prison jumpsuit. But even if they cleaned him up, the horror of that day was still etched into his skin, a constant reminder of what he had done. Hours passed. The detectives tried to piece together the events, trying to understand how one lie could lead to such a horrific crime. One of the detectives stepped forward. "Why did you do it, Michael?" His voice was calm but penetrating. He searched for even the smallest sign of truth amidst the walls of silence Michael had built around himself. For the first time since his arrest, Michael lifted his head. His eyes were empty and filled with terror, a mix of grief and disbelief. "I didn't know," he whispered. His voice was barely audible. I, I loved her, and she lied to me. She wasn't who she said she was." The detective leaned forward, his gaze sharpened, his voice firm. "But does that make it a reason to kill her?" "So, you decided to beat her to the brink of death and then dismember her body? Do you even understand what you've done?" Michael lowered his gaze and remained silent. It was as if the weight of his actions had become too heavy to bear. It was clear something inside him had broken. A fragile mind that had collapsed under the pressure of betrayal, rage, and inner insecurities. This brutal crime quickly became the headline of the news, not only because of its shocking violence, but also because of the revelation of Alyssa's past, which sparked heated debates in the media. The truth that she was a transgender woman stunned the community and led to discussions about gender identity, secrecy, and the boundaries of trust in relationships. As the trial date approached, Michael's legal team prepared a defense based on emotional distress, trying to portray him as a man so consumed by betrayal that, in a moment of madness, he lost control. They argued that the discovery of Alyssa's secret had hit him so hard that he emotionally collapsed. However, the prosecution presented a different picture. They painted Michael as a ruthless murderer who killed his wife in a brutal, savage attack. Alyssa's character came under intense scrutiny, but the primary focus was on Michael and the horror of that fateful night. Witnesses were called to the stand. Friends and neighbors spoke of the couple as a happy pair, but some mentioned that Michael always seemed a little controlling, a shadow of darkness behind their calm, seemingly perfect life. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a scene of intense emotions. Images of the crime scene were presented to the jury, the walls covered in blood, Alyssa's dismembered body. A heavy silence hung in the courtroom, but the bitterest moment came when Alyssa's mother took the stand. Her face was etched with grief. "My daughter loved Michael," her voice broke, "but she was always afraid to tell him the truth." Her words hung in the air, like a heavy cloud that could not be dispersed. A painful reminder of a life that ended far too soon. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments, and emotional pleas from both sides, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Michael showed no particular reaction. His face was a mask of surrender. He had gone from a married man with a bright future to a convicted killer. As he was escorted out of the courtroom, he glanced at the gallery, where Alyssa's family was sitting. Their eyes were filled with pain and sorrow. It was clear that no amount of justice could bring her back or undo the harm that had been done. Even after the trial ended, the case remained hot in the media and social networks. Documentary videos and news clips were viewed millions of times, and the tragic life and death story of Alyssa resonated with many people across the country. Support for Alyssa surged on social media. A hashtag, Justice for Alyssa Slaughter, went viral, with many calling for greater support and rights for transgender individuals. The house that once was their home was put up for sale soon after, but neighbors said it would never feel the same again. No one wanted to live there, one of them whispered in an interview. The memory of that night still hangs in the air. As for Michael's family, they were faced with an unbelievable truth. Some went into shock, while others were in denial. "We never knew him like this," one of his relatives had said. This case not only destroyed the lives of those directly involved, but also forced a society to confront harsh truths. Truths about identity, trust, and the fragility of human relationships. But this story isn't just about one murder. It's a bitter reminder how internal fears, social judgments, and cultural pressures can tear lives apart in the most brutal way possible. Michael's uncontrollable rage serves as a haunting reminder of the dangers that emerge when identity, trust, and masculinity tragically collide. In the end, the tragedy of Michael and Alyssa stands as a powerful lesson about the importance of honesty, acceptance, and the horrific consequences that arise when these principles are ignored. We invite you to share your thoughts with us in the comments section. If you found this story insightful, please follow us and like our page to show your support. We appreciate your engagement.